Tell me about it, stud. Grease wasn't just a sunny musical about teenage love. It was a battlefield of clashing egos, hidden dangers, and wild production choices. Behind the slick choreography and pop anthems lurked toxic on-set behavior, bizarre studio interference, and even life-threatening stunts. What audiences never saw was the chaos of chain-smoking actors, age-inappropriate casting, explosive tempers, and a finale that nearly collapsed. Today we'll uncover 20 weird facts about Grease that the studio tried to keep hidden. And wait until the bonus fact, a secret so strange it rewrites the way you see this cult classic forever. Buckle up, let's grease the wheels and roll into the truth. The cast was way too old to play teens. Grease sold itself as a story about high school seniors, but the cast list looked more like a PTA meeting than a yearbook. John Travolta was 23, already a rising TV star. Stockard Channing, playing Rizzo, was 33 years old, closer to a teacher's age than a student's. Even Jeff Conaway, the heartthrob Kennedy, was nearly 27. Why? Paramount didn't trust unknown teens to carry the film. They wanted bankable names, even if audiences had to suspend disbelief. To hide the age gap, makeup crews used heavy pancake foundation, bright lighting, and strategic costumes, but fans noticed. The obvious maturity of the actors gave the film a surreal quality, like adults trapped in teenage limbo. What was supposed to be youthful energy turned into something darker, a reminder that Hollywood would rather distort reality than gamble on fresh talent. Olivia Newton-John almost turned down the role. Olivia Newton-John was already a global pop sensation when she was approached to play Sandy, but she balked at the offer. At 29, she feared she was too old, and after a failed film, Tomorrow, she doubted her acting ability. John Travolta, however, insisted she was perfect. Paramount staged a screen test where Olivia played opposite him in the drive-in scene. The chemistry was undeniable, but the studio still hesitated. The clincher? Producers agreed to rewrite Sandy as an Australian transfer student, masking Olivia's accent and making her feel more comfortable in the role. What audiences didn't know is that Olivia was so insecure she demanded final approval over her screen tests before signing. Had she refused, the role might have gone to Carrie Fisher, who was briefly considered. The entire identity of Sandy, the sweet girl turned rebel, was hanging by a thread. Jeff Conaway's injuries were brutal. Jeff Conaway brought swagger to Kinnicky, but off-camera he endured constant pain. During the famous Greased Lightnin' number, a choreographed lift went wrong and left him with a permanently injured back. He reportedly needed painkillers just to finish the film, a tragic foreshadowing of his later struggles with addiction. The injury wasn't the only indignity. Conaway's ego took a hit when Travolta, originally cast as Duty, pushed to take over Kinnicky's signature song Greased Lightnin'. The producers sided with their rising star. Conaway was furious, but powerless. What audiences saw was a confident gang leader. What Conaway lived was a mix of humiliation and physical agony. He once confessed that Grease, the film that made him famous, also destroyed his body and planted the seeds of personal tragedy that haunted him until his death. The heat wave nearly killed the cast. Shooting Grease in Los Angeles during the summer of 1977 was torture. Temperatures often soared over 100 degrees, and the cast was forced into leather jackets, heavy poodle skirts, and full makeup. On the set of Summer Nights, dozens of extras fainted from heat exhaustion. Stockard Channing recalled that actors had to peel themselves off vinyl seats between takes. Olivia Newton-John reportedly suffered dizzy spells, while Jeff Conaway chain-smoked between scenes to calm his pain. The worst offender? The gymnasium scene for the dance-off. The set was so blisteringly hot, cameramen wrung sweat from their shirts and lights threatened to explode from overheating. The irony is sharp. A film that radiates carefree summer fun was filmed in conditions closer to survival training. Behind every smile was a desperate effort not to collapse under the relentless sun. The flying car ending was a studio compromise. The bizarre finale, where Danny and Sandy's car literally flies into the sky, has baffled audiences for decades. It wasn't in the original stage musical. In fact, even the cast questioned it. Director Randall Kleiser admitted the choice came from Paramount executives who wanted a magical ending to make the film more marketable. The problem? No explanation was given. The effect was achieved with a crude crane lift and visual trickery, but actors feared the car could slip from its rigging. Travolta later joked, "We didn't know if we were going to heaven or hell." The surreal ending sparked decades of fan theories. Was Sandy dead all along? Was it a fantasy sequence? The truth is simpler but stranger. Hollywood thought levitating a convertible would sell more tickets. It wasn't storytelling, it was marketing disguised as magic. Travolta demanded creative control. John Travolta wasn't just the star, he was a rising powerhouse fresh off Saturday Night Fever. On Grease, he flexed that new authority. Travolta reportedly demanded multiple retakes of his close-ups, often clashing with director Randall Kleiser. He also insisted the camera angles highlight his signature moves. One notorious example. During Summer Nights, Travolta fought to keep his solo line framed just right. Kleiser later revealed that Travolta stopped filming mid-song because the camera wasn't catching his good side. He refused to continue until the angle was fixed. What audiences didn't realize was how much of Danny Zuko was shaped not by the script, but by Travolta's insecurities and ambition. His charm on screen came at the cost of behind-the-scenes tension. It wasn't collaboration, it was dominance disguised as performance. Stockard Channing was nearly fired. Stockard Channing's Rizzo became one of the film's most iconic roles, but at first producers thought she was all wrong. At 33, she was far older than the rest of the cast. Executives worried audiences wouldn't buy her as a teenager. Rumors swirled that the studio wanted to replace her mid-shoot. Channing, however, fought back with raw intensity. Her performance of "There Are Worse Things I Could Do" silenced doubters. Director Randall Kleiser called it the turning point. Suddenly, what looked like miscasting became a strength. Her maturity added gravitas to Rizzo's cynicism. Behind the cameras, though, Channing sensed her fragile footing. She later admitted she felt constantly scrutinized. What saved her wasn't studio approval, but the undeniable truth. No one else could deliver Rizzo's wounded bravado with such authenticity. The Bee Gees almost wrote the music. Imagine Grease without "You're the One That I Want" or "Hopelessly Devoted to You." It nearly happened. Paramount originally considered hiring the Bee Gees to write new songs for the film. At the time, disco fever was peaking and the studio wanted to cash in. But John Travolta, who had just worked with the Gibb brothers on Saturday Night Fever, opposed the idea. He believed Grease needed a more rock and roll sound. Eventually, Olivia Newton-John's producer, John Farrar, composed the new tracks instead. His additions, especially "You're the One That I Want," became cultural juggernauts. What audiences didn't know is that without Travolta's pushback, Grease could have ended up as a disco-drenched spin-off of Saturday Night Fever. The choice between disco and rock wasn't just musical, it shaped the entire legacy of the film. The T-Birds resented their name change. In the original stage musical, Danny's gang was called the Burger Palace Boys, but Paramount executives thought that sounded too regional. They rebranded them as the T-Birds, hoping to tie into 1950s car culture. The cast hated it. Jeff Conaway and Barry Pearl complained it stripped away authenticity. The original name was quirky, tied to the stage show's working-class roots. The T-Birds, they felt, made them sound like cartoon tough guys, but the studio won. The change wasn't just cosmetic, it represented a larger tension, Broadway grit versus Hollywood gloss. The film's sheen made it globally marketable, but at the cost of its scrappy authenticity. What audiences didn't know is that every leather jacket on screen was part of a compromise. Rebels carefully manufactured by executives in suits. Olivia's tight pants nearly sent her to the ERs. The iconic black pants Olivia Newton-John wore in the finale weren't store-bought costumes, they were vintage, decades old, and so tight that she had to be literally sewn into them before filming each day. The seams were fragile. Crew members kept a sewing kit on standby in case they split mid-scene. Olivia herself recalled barely being able to breathe or sit down. She only removed them between takes by lying flat while assistants unstitched her. The pants looked effortless on screen. In reality, they were torture. Newton-John once joked she had to survive on shallow breaths during "You're the One That I Want." What seemed like a liberated transformation into Bad Sandy was actually an endurance test. Costume design bordering on cruelty for the sake of cinematic impact. A cast member nearly burned alive. During the carnival sequence, one attraction used real flames as part of its design. While filming, a malfunction caused sparks to shower dangerously close to the cast. Didi Khan, who played Frenchie, recalled in interviews that extras screamed when smoke began drifting toward the rides. The fire crew rushed in, but for a few tense moments, actors thought they were trapped in a real blaze. The incident was quickly hushed up to avoid bad press, and production continued as if nothing had happened. Audiences saw a lighthearted finale with Ferris wheels and balloons. The truth was that one misstep could have turned the joyous closing scenes into a tragedy. Behind the smiles, fear lingered. What looks like teenage celebration on screen was shot under the shadow of a near disaster. Jeff Conaway was humiliated by Travolta. On screen, Danny and Kenickie were brothers in arms. Off-screen, John Travolta overshadowed Jeff Conaway at every turn. Originally, Conaway's Kenickie was supposed to sing "Greased Lightnin'," but Travolta argued the song should go to his character, Danny. The producers caved, leaving Conaway bitter. Even worse, Travolta often improvised lines that cut into Conaway's screen time. Crew members noticed the growing tension. Conaway later admitted he felt sidelined and diminished. The resentment festered long after filming wrapped. What audiences didn't know is that the movie's most joyful duet of friendship masked bruised egos and betrayal. Kenickie's swagger wasn't entirely acting. It was also Jeff Conaway's attempt to reclaim dignity in a production that repeatedly reminded him who the real star was. The actors were constantly sick. The grueling heat, heavy costumes, and nonstop smoking on set created a breeding ground for illness. Cast members joked that half the production was filmed between coughs and sneezes. Olivia Newton-John admitted she often lost her voice and had to sip honey water before singing. Jeff Conaway, already injured, relied on painkillers that weakened his immune system. Stockard Channing fought through exhaustion during her emotional ballad. Even John Travolta fell sick midway through, forcing delays on musical numbers. The irony? A film that looks like an endless summer of health and vitality was filmed by actors barely hanging on. Every polished frame masked a crew struggling to function under punishing conditions. Hollywood's gloss didn't hide reality, it smothered it. Paramount feared the film would flop. Today, Grease is remembered as one of the highest-grossing musicals ever, but in 1977, Paramount was nervous. Musicals were considered dead after expensive failures like At Long Last Love. Studio executives worried the project was too risky. Test screenings didn't help. Some early audiences found the mix of 1950s nostalgia and 1970s pop songs disjointed. Insiders whispered the film might sink before it swam. To protect themselves, Paramount kept budgets tight, slashed rehearsal time, and rushed production. When Grease exploded into a global phenomenon, studio executives quickly rewrote history. But what fans didn't know is how close the film came to being shelved as another failed musical experiment? Its eventual triumph wasn't confidence, it was blind luck colliding with star power.